We're Andrew Bridgen here outside the Google headquarters in London. Just before you got here, they obviously had some intel about this and they suddenly locked all the doors at the front here. It seems to me that's kind of an analogy for the way in which truth or even criticism and discussion is being treated by Google and the big tech companies. What do you think about that?
Well, it's clear there's a huge amount of censorship going on across the world now. We're in a situation where a medical academic can't interview a British elected member of Parliament without an American tech company, tech giant deciding it's unsuitable.
When your video of a speech in Parliament was taken off YouTube, who was it complained, and was there any response about any detail?
But it's happened twice. They've actually taken speeches that I've made in the Chamber of the House of Commons, and I included on the video the government response, so it was the full debate, half-an-hour debate, and they took them down twice. We got them back up within 3 or 4 days. I think there were 4.2 million people viewed the fact that it had been taken down off YouTube. I mean, to be honest, if you want to make anything popular in this country, you've got to ban it, haven't you?
Was it a challenge, or was it a specific challenge, or did they just reinstate it?
No, we had to formally challenge, and I had a formal apology, which I put up on Twitter, that they said they wouldn't do it again.
Okay. I watched the video very carefully with Dr John Campbell, and it seems there was one comment that was made, that you made. I won't repeat, but I'll just say that their rules say you cannot say effective in relation to certain medical treatments, and that seems to be one sentence that slipped through without them sort of which they use as an excuse to block. Does it not seem that this is entirely arbitrary?
It's anti-scientific, isn't it? I mean, if it's a bit like me saying there's only one politics, and I'm going to tell you what the policies are, and you can't argue against them, and I don't have to defend them because that's the accepted. Science and politics have to be open to debate.
But Fauci is science.
I mean, you mentioned the fact that it's not just in one country, and Dr. John Campbell seemed a bit taken aback, and then he thought, yes, of course. But it's quite clear that this is a global lockstep policy measure.
Absolutely. I mean, for those who say it's the cock-up, not conspiracy, and I know the quality of people that we've had at the top of government for the last 13 years, and it's not impressive, and neither's the opposition. But what you've got to, given that the whole world's in lockstep, or most of the world's in lockstep, what you've got for it to be cock-up, everybody's got to make the same mistakes about the same policies at the same time. Well, that's pretty much impossible. The chances of that, they haven't all had somebody as incompetent as Matt Hancock running their health service. We can't blame, that didn't happen in Canada, North America, and the rest of Europe.
I asked a question to people at Speakers Corner the other day. It was, do you remember that you've ever had a coronavirus before 2019? And only one person said yes.
25% of the common colds are coronaviruses.
Right. Exactly.
And it says on bottles of Dettol.
Every year, about 10%, according to the Glasgow study, between 5 and 15% of people in the winter flu seasons are.
Well, we didn't have any flu during the. It's the only year we. I did ask Stephen Barclay in a debate in the questions a couple of months ago. I asked him because he said that the NHS had come under a lot of pressure this December with flu, and I said. Could he tell me where the influenza virus has been hiding for 18 months? Because there were almost no flu deaths for the first time ever, while we were having deaths from COVID-19.
Dr. Campbell did report some months ago that there was a study in Italy that showed a relatively high prevalence of SARS-CoV-2.
I sent that to him. I posted that a long time ago. Yes, what it was is that in Italy there's a lab that collected cancer biopsy samples. Yeah. They'd retained the samples, and they were from the end of August, beginning of September 2019, and they tested them for COVID-19, and 15% were positive. They also then knew the geographic spread of them, and it was the whole of Italy, from Sicily to northern Italy. They knew exactly where. Well, I mean, if it was all over Italy at the end of August 19, it was all over UK, it was all over North America. But where were the queues of people at the hospital and all the deaths? There weren't any.
Are you aware that the Chinese leading epidemiologist Zhongnan Shan published a paper in 2013 that SARS One was 20% prevalence amongst children in Guangzhou in 2012, 10 to 12.
I'm not aware of that.
Oh, I'll send you the paper then, yeah.
And it's interesting, they talk about natural immunity. There's quite a bit of evidence out there now that if you'd actually had SARS-1, you're still immune to COVID-19.
That's right. So where do we go with all of this? Where is all this heading?
Well, I think we've had some wins. Until I spoke out on the first speech on the 13th of December, the MHRA were pushing for us to authorise vaccines of babies down to 6 months. That never happened. It's happened around the world. It's happened in Australia. It's happened in America and Canada. It didn't happen here. And then the government said that it's only going to be the over 50s, and those with immunosuppression, which I think is very dangerous. And then after the second speech on the 17th of March, they pushed it back to the over 75. So the government will never admit they've had to retreat.
They want to kill me.
I'm sure they do.
What about the use of mRNA vaccines? One for other people, for other diseases, two for veterinary purposes.
I think the whole science of the mRNA vaccines or their use is completely, and we need a lot of research on this. And obviously I've been privileged to be in the company of Dr. Malone, who worked on this technology a long time ago, and I'll tell you now, he's very badly vaccine harmed because he believed it, and then he went to them after he'd had 2 vaccines and said, how did you sort out all the problems with it? And they said, what problems? With the technology. And then he realised that they hadn't.
How do you think we can control the power of big tech and big data?
You'd hope that we can switch to other platforms that are less censorious, but I mean, they can always be bought up and bought in by legislation. At the end of the day, we're going to have to do it through democracy, which they're going to hate, but currently there are no alternatives to the cartel of parties which are going to deliver you the same outcome.
If there was some method, some constitutional change that could be introduced to guarantee that members of Parliament
we may have to go
affordable.
back to common law, and what people have got to understand is that Parliament is not sovereign. The people are sovereign. Parliament can't give away your sovereignty to the WHO, and I'm afraid, no is a very small word, but if enough people say it, it's got a massive meaning. And we're just going to say, no, I don't comply. Now, I don't agree with these 15-minute low-traffic neighbourhoods. I don't agree with signing up powers to the WHO. I mean, if you wanted an unelected, unaccountable body, you couldn't have any more than the WHO. They don't pay tax anywhere, and they're immune from prosecution due to diplomatic immunity for them and their families. And given the track record of some of the people running it, I'm not surprised they took those jobs. They needed it.
Would you say they're in the pay or under the control of Big Pharma?
Well, if you look at the funding of the WHO, it's 84% external sources. It's not funded by the nation states who are going to be under the rules. And also, it's if you're an external sponsor, you get to choose what your money's spent on. So you're directing the direction of policy of the WHO.
No decision goes through the World Health Organization without first being okayed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Well, between them and Gavi, they are the biggest funders of the WHO. And you might remember that they're the people who invested heavily in the mRNA technology. And if you look at what the WHO are saying now, they've learnt nothing from the last pandemic. They still think that we're in. They keep extending every 6 months the public health emergency of international concern, not only for COVID-19 but also for monkeypox. For monkeypox, that's still, as far as they're concerned. So we'd still be in an emergency situation. They still don't accept there are any existing treatments that could be used. So they still don't accept, despite all the science. They don't accept any of that, so the only solution is mRNA vaccines, and they want them to be produced even faster. That means even less testing, and they want to have the authorization to say, yes, you can use them, but they would be able to mandate jabs, mandate lockdowns. They could shut any. They'll have the ability to shut any business down in the UK and not give a reason.
And what do you think will happen if they attempt to do something like that?
Well, there's going to be pushback.
Well, there's going to be. I hope there's going to be pushback, but let's have the pushback before our Parliament. We've got to bombard MPs.
We've got to go on the offensive.
I'm at a meeting yesterday with Tess Laurie and her team.
Amazing woman.
the World Council for Health.
Yeah.
We've got a fantastic booklet on the dangers and risks of the WHO pandemic treaty and the changes to the international health regulations. That's going to go to every MP hopefully next week. I've put in for a debate next week on the amendments to the international health regulations.
Brilliant. Is that Friday?
Well, it normally takes me about 3 weeks to get one. They don't give me. They don't give me. Oh, you'll have to have a word with the speaker. You'll have to have a word with the speaker.
It's potentially my brother's.
So
have you got, or could you arrange an interview and discussion with yourself and Robert Kennedy Jr., who seems to be making waves in America?
Well, believe it or not, when I was suspended by the Conservative Party, and it's been a week now. When they announced they'd suspended me, they did announced that so I can't appeal, because the appeal was contingent on confidential. Well, I didn't leak that. They actually informed me I was expelled. Their recommendation of the Kangaroo Court was that I'd be expelled. They gave me that on the 12th of April. They said I've got 28 days to put an appeal in, but if any publicity comes out about it, there's no appeal. You've broken the appeal, and then they leaked it. And not one in that week, not one Conservative MP I've worked with for 13 years has rung me. An hour after I was suspended, within an hour, Robert Kennedy Jr. rang me from America and said it was disgusting.
That's incredible.
Great.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, things are on the move. Do you think so? A little bit anyway.
Well, it was. I thought Piers Morgan showed his true colours when he's got an interview with a presidential candidate of that quality, and when he doesn't say what he wants about the vaccines, we're running out of time.
Piers Morgan's deep state.
Well, he said the same to me, but it sounded a bit down.
He has backtracked a little bit.
Not enough.
Yeah, but he's
but
totally.
He should apologise to me for attacking me.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, good interview.
What I wanted to ask you, do you think that part of pushing you out was the misinterpretation of what you actually quoted regarding the comparing with the?
Well, I was using it as a timeline. It was since
with the Holocaust. They
were desperately looking for an excuse to expel me.
And that's their favourite excuse.
You
censoring John.
never said that it was a worse atrocity. You didn't actually compare it. Did
No,
you?
I used it as a time reference.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
it's not the worst atrocity.
I'm Jewish, by the way, so if anyone should be
no way
offended,
that
it would
was
be me.
under any normal.
Well, it's interesting. I was after all came out of my suspension. I was invited by the local synagogue in Westminster to go and give a speech about vaccine harms on the 28th of March.
Right.
Yeah. Why do you think anti-Semitism is used the way it is in politics today?
Because it's just a dog whistle, hates counselling, and you know.
How is your local party responding?
Well, anyway,
to expulsion?
we'll see, because next week there'll be something happening in the court case against Mr. Hancock.
Resist!
Fight! Do not comply!
So what are you going to say about Google and banning of Dr John Campbell?
It's a disgrace.
One final question. Did any Labour MPs come to you and say that they think you might be right?
No, not one.
That's all right.
Not
I was
one.
a Labour Party member for decades.
Not one. I've had a couple of SNP have come to me and said, looks like you're right, and I've had about 10 Conservatives quietly come to me, but not that they'd ever speak out.
Absolutely disgraceful, unbelievable.
What about the people that were speaking?
And also, it's interesting. I think there were 82 or 84 Conservatives who voted against Plan B in December 21. What I'll say is, have a look how many of those have been suspended or kicked out the party of that list of 80 odd MPs that voted against. A lot of them have been kicked out of the party.
Thanks very much.
All the best.
See ya.
Whenever they say to you the science is settled about anything, the alarm bells should start ringing, because it never is.
Yeah.
What they mean is there's only one acceptable narrative. If you don't do that, you get censored. And it's going to get a lot worse if we get these additions to the online harms bill, if we sign up to the WHO treaty, pandemic treaty. I mean, there is only going to be one accepted narrative across all social media, and it'll be the one that they say.
Do you feel that others are feeling insecure about speaking out. Maybe they know the truth about the...
A lot of them do know the truth. I mean, I would say that 20 MPs...
They don't want to lose their jobs, perhaps?
Yep. 20 odd MPs of at least 3 different parties have been up to me over the last few months, quietly in a call, and said, "You're definitely onto something. There's something not right about all this. Keep going." But that's a million miles from saying I'll stand up in the chamber. I mean, we can't even have a debate in the House of Commons or any other Parliament on the issue of the excess deficit. I actually had 2 long-serving members of staff left me last week who've been in my office for many years.
Oh dear.
And it's not that they were quite open about it. It's not that they don't believe everything I'm saying is true. It's actually quite scary. They said, "We've seen the intimidation that's been unleashed on you. We've got wives and families and houses, and we don't want it to happen to us." So we're staying with the party.
Yeah. Good. Just lastly, because I think Heiko might want to ask you something. Do you think that inevitably this is all going to come out, or are they going to hide it forever and ever?
I'm thinking about the post office scandal, which is a much smaller, much smaller.
It came out in the end.
The first 5 years, after 3 years of investigation, I had all the proof that the sub postmasters were innocent. I couldn't get any newspaper or TV outlet to let me on to talk about this. After 5 years, not only did I know and colleagues in the House knew, the government knew and the post office knew, and it still took another 8 years to get it dealt with and get the compensation. There are still people waiting for compensation now.
So we got 13 years to go.
Oh God! Well,
people take to the streets when the WEF
this is not even on a national scale. This is on an international scale. It only has to break any part of the world, and it's broken. I don't know whether it could be because of the South African court case. It could be the court cases that are going on in India now. It could be Australia. Could be Australia.
But
wherever it breaks, it breaks.
Yeah, of course. Just lastly, sorry, I know I said lastly before, but lastly, your reason for being here today is connected with your interview with John Campbell.
I gave
that was taken off air.
Yep.
And I understand
it's still off air, isn't it?
John Campbell's got a strike.
Yep.
Yeah, and he didn't really do anything wrong, did he? I mean,
what you've got is a respected medical professional who's produced a lot of information, training videos for nurses, and has worked in the NHS most of his life. You've got him interviewing an elected member of Parliament over important issues, contemporaneous issues around vaccines and the pandemic policy and why I was expelled from the Conservative Party. Basically, a foreign corporation under pressure has decided what the British people or the people of the world can see. That's not democracy, that's not free speech, and I put it to you, if anyone had said we'd be in this situation 3 years ago and said in 2023 this is what will be happening, no one would have believed it. This isn't the society that people think we're living in, and it's only heading in one direction. And there's a lot of very dangerous legislation going through the House of Commons, which
the online harms bill, for example.
Absolutely, and the WHO treaty, and the amendments to the health international health regulations, which we probably won't even have a vote on. They're just going to go through, and they're all heading the same direction. I thought I was serving for many years in a parliament that legislated for the people. Now we're in a parliament that legislates things upon the people, and there's a huge difference.
And we've got a
that.
king who wants to do the same thing.